Welcome. Welcome to our third in the series of speaking out against racism and hate in Canada. Now, before I get to the words of the study guide provided by the Presbyterian Church in Canada, I'd like to remind us of the 4 agreements. Stay engaged, experience discomfort, speak your truth, and expect and accept non-closure. I hope you're also taking the opportunity to learn more and explore more on your own. If you're interested in expanding your perspective, I'd recommend a couple of things. On Netflix, if you're a subscriber, there's a documentary called 13th. After watching that documentary, if you check out this one called 13th, it's about the American prison system. I'd encourage you to take some time to try and map it out to Canada in some way. Consider perhaps the reality of our own prison system. For example, did you know that 1/3 of inmates in Canada are Indigenous, even though Indigenous peoples only make up about 5% of our total population? It's something to think about, and it's something that will help us disrupt this typically not in Canada kind of mindset. And perhaps for a book recommendation, again, for some Canadian context, I'd highly recommend Desmond Cole's The Skin We're In, to give you a landscape of the Canadian context. And maybe for a podcast, I'd recommend Anti-Racist Educator Reads. It features an actual local host, Colinda, Clyne, and her first episodes are actually based on Cole's book that I've already just recommended. I'd highly recommend this podcast, even though it speaks through the lens of educators, but it's a great opportunity to sort of engage in this conversation about anti-racism in a different kind of way, and has speakers from persons of color, Black and Indigenous individuals as well. I'll be sure to put these recommendations in the links below, and do check those out. I encourage you to do so. Now let's get to part 3 in our study guide. It's of course not only the church that struggles with racism. As recent data from across the country shows, there's an increased number of people in Canada who escalate racist thinking and acts of hatred or even physical violence stemming from an intolerance of diversity. And it has become clear, for example, that hate crimes in Canada are on the rise. According to the latest stats for Canada that was available when this report was initially written, and you'll find some of these comments here, you'll see that in 2017, police reported criminal incidents motivated by hate were up 47%. And the largest increase in hatred of a religion or race or ethnicity was what it was about. You'll see lots of other increases, 32% increase of things related to hatred of race or ethnicity, targeting mostly Black and Arab and West Asian populations. We also see between 2016 and 2017 that police reported hate crimes motivated by religion was actually increased by 83%, and mostly targeting the Muslim and Jewish communities. It's important to note that these statistics represented reported hate crimes. Communities who are hesitant to report crimes targeting them due to issues such as mistrust of police or social services will always be underrepresented in this data. Now, one of the factors leading to rising hate crime in Canada is, of course, online forums promoting hate or maybe even allowing room for it. And these online spaces have contributed to the rising numbers of hate crime in the physical world, as reported in the recent report of the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights titled "Taking Action to End Online Hate." As this report states, online hate undermines the well-being and sense of security of victims, as well as their sense of belonging. More generally, it increases discord in society and contributes to the marginalization of certain groups by convincing listeners of the inferiority of the targeted group. As noted by Bradley Galloway from the Organization for the Prevention of Violence, the perpetuation of associated rhetoric can create an environment where discrimination, harassment, and violence are viewed by individuals as not only a reasonable response or reaction, but also a necessary one. Online hate contributes to radicalization of people, and it also leads to the risk that sympathizers of hate speech will take action. But it's not just hate crimes and radicalization that are a problem. Even the more subtle and less obviously violent forms of racism increase the likelihood that people of color will be targeted for harm or violence or even death. And this is because subtly reinforcing the idea that some people matter less or more through actions such as letting stereotypes go unchallenged or not speaking up when racist jokes or assumptions are made, creates this sense that racism is socially acceptable, even if it's harmful. Think about that. Socially acceptable, even if it's harmful. And anytime racist speech, action, or institutional structures are allowed to go unchallenged, it normalizes that sense that it's okay to harm certain people. It's okay to harm certain people. And that leads to this spiraling domino effect where more people further internalize racist thinking, allowing still higher levels of social tolerance for discrimination, hate, and violence. And when internalized racism reaches certain levels, we don't even see that violence as violence anymore. We might just refer to it as the way things are. It's just the way things are. So until our next episode, I'd encourage you to reflect on these questions. First of all, as you think back and roll back if you want to watch again and press pause on the statistics, maybe just look at those statistics, those Canadian statistics around hate crimes related to race and religion. And just think about some of the things that stuck out to you in the statistics you saw. Now, in that last slide, you saw 3 phrases. It's socially acceptable, even if it's harmful. It's okay to harm certain people, or it's just the way things are. So I'd invite you to think about these kind of questions. Have you heard phrases like these before in conversations with people? How did it make you feel then? And having started to engage in this conversation, starting to look at some of this material and maybe opening your mind and heart and spirit into this, do you feel any different seeing them in the context of this kind of study? And then I'd ask you to do one more thing. I'd encourage you to take some time for some personal reflection using this activity as your baseline. Think of a news story you heard recently that involved racism. Sadly, there are likely far too many to draw from. But then what I'd like you to do is to write down what you remember and then spend some time reflecting on that. How did it make you feel? Did you read past the first few paragraphs when you first saw the news story? Was it a story in your own community or was it somewhere else? And if it was somewhere else, do you think that there are similar issues in your own community? Think about those things for this coming week. And that's it. That's it for part 3 in our study. Thanks again for joining me. I'd encourage you to check out the video recommendations at the end of this episode today and noted in the description. The one that you can click on at the end of the video is a short video featuring an individual named Jay Smooth. It's entitled What They Did and What They Are, Conversations Around Race. I think it's got some really valuable insights, in my opinion, in how to have difficult conversations around calling out racism in some of our personal interactions. He makes some really interesting distinctions. And if you'd like to go a bit deeper on how Jay Smooth thinks, there's a fuller talk, and I've included that link to his TED Talk of how I stopped worrying and love discussing race. It's below in the description as well. And as always, please subscribe to our channel to keep up to date when new episodes are posted. And thank you so much for staying engaged today. Thank you.